Hey everyone, Carl here with Littleroot Lessons, bringing you a deep dive featuring Lugia this week. Lugia is the Gen 2 partner to Ho-Oh, which we covered much earlier in Series 10. Lugia is something that benefited a ton from Dynamax, and with Series 11 bringing Dynamax back to the format, I thought it would be a good idea to maybe prep ahead of time and look at some of these restricteds that we haven't talked about that benefited a lot from Dynamax. But before we get started on that, make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications for when new videos go live. Leave a comment down below who you want to see me cover restricted-wise next week. We are currently doing polls on Twitter to select the videos for Friday. So this Friday will be Rapid Strike Urshifu. If you want to see other Pokemon covered, or if you want to go and actually vote in that, go follow us on Twitter at LRLessons. You can go and take part in all the polls and suggestions there. And let's just get started with Lugia here. Lugia is a bulky offensive attacker. It's in a weird spot because it just doesn't do a ton of damage, but it still does enough to where you can actually viably use it. It also has insane bulk. Defenses are 130 and 154 respectively, if I remember correctly. With a very good base HP and a really good base speed, Lugia does a lot when it comes to terms of just being a restricted threat. Unfortunately, it relies a lot on weakness policy or calm mind to get the ball rolling, so to speak, for Lugia's damage output. Because otherwise, Lugia's coverage it's good, but a lot of what people play usually isn't good enough for this format. And outside of being offensive damaging things, we have moves like Thunder Wave, Icy Wind, and Bulldoze, all which give Lugia a little bit of utility and can make it a little bit more niche of a restricted pick in some situations. Even though it only was played in Series 8 and that's all we really have to go on, Lugia was actually a very good choice in the Dynamax meta. Multi-scale plus doubling your HP meant that you could activate a weakness policy for almost free in many situations, even if they broke your multi-scale early, and then using Max Airstream and Max Quake to boost your special defense or your speed and kind of just try to take over the game that way. However, all of this success doesn't transfer over to Series 10 very well, mainly because there's no Dynamax. Lugia has kind of struggled as of late to make a good impact in the format, mainly due to its weakness to Calyrex Shadow and Regieleki and Dark Urshifu and stuff like that. But moreover, it's just very low damage output. Base 90 attack and special attack isn't anything to write home about when it comes to restricted picks. If you look at like Zacian, which is astronomically high, Calyrex Shadow also astronomically high. So if you're looking for damage, Lugia is not always the best answer. But if your team wants that bulky restricted kind of thing, especially if you have like a bunch of ground weaknesses, Lugia does offer really good support in that way. Common partners for Lugia tend to be more on the offensive side, mainly due to the fact that Lugia's lower special attack mean that you want more damage. These things are included like Stack Attacka, Entei, Rillaboom, Mimikyu, Incineroar, and other Pokemon of that nature looking to either A, help Lugia survive longer, or B, kind of deal their own damage and take over the game in their own way. Other things to consider when you're building with Lugia or looking at partners are ways to deal with Regieleki. Landorus and Raichu are both very common with Lugia, mainly because they both help your electric weakness out a ton. Landorus being a good switch-in, Raichu having Lightning Rod, being able to redirect away those electric type attacks into it, plus giving it a special attack boost in the turn, which then can just snowball Raichu a little bit out of control. Beyond that, you want to just make sure you always have some kind of damage. Lugia works well when you have Pokemon that I mentioned are weak to ground, like Entei, Incineroar, and Stack Attacka. Lugia also being a Psychic type means that you don't want to get too many dark weaknesses on your team or ghost weaknesses, which it's hard to do, especially when you want to play these Pokemon that answer Calyrex Shadow, that answer certain Pokemon, and it can kind of just build up over time. When we look at the metagame breakdown, we see that the move selection and items are fairly small actually. Most Lugia are always weakness policy, they're almost always multi-scale, and they almost always run Aerial Blast, Earth Power, Recover, and Calm Mind. There's very few that run Protect and Shadow Ball. Those sets usually belong to the leftover sets, mainly because you're dropping Recover and Calm Mind for extra damage and protecting yourself to kind of get extra recovery. Which it's kind of interesting when we take a look at Lugia. It's just like the only things that change between Lugia sets usually are the EVs. The EVs are all over the place, mainly because the bulk is so good. Everyone's trying to calc for certain things, for certain differences, and try to make little itty bitty nitpicky differences there. However, it just doesn't feel like it's enough for Lugia to actually take off, especially since it has really good coverage in the form of like electric coverage, ice coverage, water coverage. We get psychic and all those other moves. The big water moves I think are like brine and maybe hydro pump. I can't remember off the top of my head. You get thunder and thunderbolt and thunder wave, ice beam, icy wind. You get earthquake, I think, and bulldoze, and you can play a physical Lugia if you wanted to. That makes you weaker to intimidate, but those are options there. So it's interesting to see that all Lugias have been narrowed down to this core set, but it's just not enough to push it over the edge in terms of use. When you're looking to build with Lugia, you make sure to kind of try and slot Lugia into teams that actually need the bulk. There's this over centralization of I need bulk because my Pokemon are dying too fast because Zacian and Calyrex Shadow and so on and so forth are blowing them up too quickly. Well, the downside of that is you lose out on your own offensive pressure. If your Pokemon are getting blown up but you're not actually dealing damage either, the bulky Pokemon's not going to help you in that situation. Things like Lugia aren't going to remedy your matchups overnight and by themselves. It usually requires a couple of changes plus adding Lugia or adding a better restricted or something like that to make your team mesh and gel against that matchup a little bit more. And try to avoid a bunch of double up weaknesses on Lugia. They're going to be attacking into that Lugia slot to break multi-scale anyway. So if you have a bunch of electric or ghost and dark weaknesses and rock weaknesses and things like that, it's hard to keep your Lugia's multi-scale alive if they're just attacking into it, doubling into it all the time. I talked about movesets a little bit earlier with Aerial Blast and Earth Power being the main things, but Lugia really thrives on its EV spreads. Some of the common spreads are like max HP or almost max HP with some good special attack investment, enough speed investment to matter on certain things. Being at that 110 base speed means that you can hit certain thresholds a little bit easier without having to sacrifice a whole lot in your EV spreads. And with Calm Mind and Weakness Policy, even a little bit of special attack investment is usually enough to pick up those KOs with Aerial Blast or Earth Power, Thunderbolt, or whatever coverage move you're running at that time. Where Lugia shines, though, is its bulk. Trying to invest in HP, defense, and special defense means that you can survive more hits more often, even after multi-scale has been broken. I don't think I actually explained this. For those that don't know, multi-scale reduces the damage of, I think, a super effective hit specifically, or no, it reduces the damage of any hit while you're at full HP, and then after that it just doesn't do anything. However, if you get back to full HP like the normal sets with Recover do, you get that multi-scale bonus back and they have to break it again and do the whole cycle again. So this is why you see a lot of these Lugia sets be general bulk with Aerial Blast and Earth Power and Calm Mind and Recover with Weakness Policy kind of things. It's just what Lugia does best and how to take the most advantage of this Pokemon. If you're looking to defeat an opposing Lugia, Lugia struggles the most against debuffs. Granted, they're not as good in Series 10 as they are in like Dynamax formats, but it still is usually enough to force a switch out, waste a Calm Mind, waste a Weakness Policy and things like that. Moves like Snarl and Struggle Bug are really, really good at doing this. Lowering that special attack on that Lugia means a ton. Since it's only base 90, if it does, they don't have a whole lot of investment, and you can prevent the Weakness Policy or the Calm Mind, those drops mean a whole lot more to Lugia, especially if it's trying to be the carry of that team. Like I just mentioned, if you can avoid activating the Weakness Policy, that means you can get into a much better spot of dealing with the Lugia over time. Once you break that multi-scale and kind of chip away at it, you can definitely get it into range of like a Calyrex Shadow or a Regieleki, just picking it up pretty easily. Speaking of Calyrex Shadow and Regieleki, those are probably two of the most common counters, I would say. Seeing a one-on-one Pokemon counter isn't the greatest thing. We don't see that too terribly often. Usually you want general counter matchups. But for these two Pokemon in particular, they are probably the best answers you can find. As long as you take care of the multi-scale first, you can usually take out the Lugia in a couple turns before it can ever actually get ramped up and deal decent damage. So to wrap up with Lugia, Lugia offers a lot in long-term damage output, mainly due to its bulk, being able to chip away at opponents and take hits over and over, but can struggle against some of the more offensive-based teams in the meta. Think hyper-offensive Zacian teams, think Calyrex Shadow within DD teams, anything that can redirect hits away from their restricted and can dish out a ton of damage back into Lugia. Lugia actually has really good coverage for restricted. Most restricteds don't have this kind of coverage. Lugia's got decent special attack and if you had that weakness policy, your Thunderbolts can KO Kyogre, your Shadow Balls can KO Calyrex Shadow, maybe even KO Calyrex Ice if you can get into that position. You get Ice coverage for Groudon, you get Ground coverage for Alecki and things like that. Even though players just use it for flying and ground, Lugia's move choices are varied and can be very, very good. It's just, it feels wrong to play anything else right now. And be wary of debuffs for your Lugia. It can just put it so far behind that it will suffer from all my friends are dead syndrome and can end up punishing you more for playing that specific restricted rather than benefiting you. And with that being said, I want to thank you all for hanging out and listening to me ramble about Lugia today. Make sure to check us out on Twitter. Handles are there on screen. Check out the Discord. Link is always in the description. Our community is great and growing, and we'd love to have you there. And remember to hit that subscribe button. Do all the fun YouTube stuff. It helps us out a ton. And with that being said, we will see you tomorrow for another laddering video. Bye, everyone.